It's interesting watching what people are saying right now because people are letting their emotions override being principled. And where I keep seeing this happening is as it relates to free speech and the right to demonstrate. I've seen a lot of comments this week where people will say things like, I believe in free speech, but if the free speech says this specific thing, insert most horrible thing you can say ever, well then I don't believe in it. No. That's not how speech works. That's not what free speech is. You are letting your emotions override your principles. And when I say principles, I don't mean your morality. I don't mean what you individually believe in. I believe in the principled nature of there being one single way that we all address everything. That's how the Constitution and the First Amendment is intended to work. Because if you say anything that somebody deems to be the most horrible thing that anybody could say ever, and somebody was to then infringe on your speech at some point, you wouldn't feel the same. Because who is the arbiter of what speech is too bad? Speech is speech. As bad as it is, that's the whole point. And just because you're emotional, justifiably so, it doesn't mean that you can go against the principles that you and so many of us have been fighting for the last 3 years and in this country since its founding. And then people will say things like, I believe in free speech and the First Amendment, but not hate speech. There's no such thing as hate speech. Kind of like there's no such thing as a hate crime. Or at least there shouldn't be, in my opinion. If somebody commits a horrible crime, that's hate. Just because the race and or gender and or whatever else is the opposite doesn't necessarily make it any more hateful. And in my opinion, I don't see the delineation between, well, this is a hate crime and this is a crime. This is a hate murder versus a murder. If you're murdering a person, it's hate. These are just manipulations and or ways to pacify voting bases to seem more virtuous. I don't think that a hate crime should be a thing, but whatever, that's a topic for another video. But in the term of hate speech, it's like, yes, you think that this is the most horrible thing that could ever be said, and it's a highly emotionally charged time. So you're saying, well, this hate speech, this is too hateful. It's like you have to be able to decipher the difference between this specific incident, whatever one you're thinking of, and the next one. Because if I say something that's really, let's say, hateful as you would determine it, about a person that, say, wants to do terrible things to kids or cut off their pen 15 or whatever, to you it would seem justified. To a person with a differing viewpoint, they'd say that's hate speech. So it's very important to separate your principles from your emotions, specifically in the moment. Then people will say things like, well, these specific protests or rallies or these specific words, this speech incites violence. There are already plenty of laws about violence. There's a huge difference between actions, taking actions, and using words. These are very different things. And saying that words may incite violence, you could draw that conclusion. But it doesn't mean that there needs to be laws and or some type of enforcement as a result of the words just by themselves. That's what the First Amendment is for. There's a difference between violence, action, and words. And there are other different laws where all speech is not completely absolute. That's not what I'm saying. Like if you say, I will give $1 million if you go and do blank to this type of person, there are already laws for that. That's not what we're talking about. So to say that a protest or a rally of any kind for any person, for anything ever, or words are too hateful because they're against this specific thing or they're so hateful or whatever, to then say that those words have to be shut down, the First Amendment doesn't apply, ultimately will be used against you later in a time where you don't think what you're saying is as inflammatory as you might think what they're saying is. That's why the First Amendment's important. That's why free speech is so paramount. You have to separate the principle from the emotion in this time. Then people will say things like, well, silence is violence, or silence means that you're siding on one side versus the other. No, it doesn't. There's billions of people in this world, and there's probably millions upon millions of horrible things that get carried out against all groups of people all over the world all the time. If I don't speak about an issue in Libya or Syria or insert country name, that doesn't mean I side with one or the other. It could mean that I don't have enough information about the situation to have a take, or that I don't want to have a take, or that no matter what my take is, there might not be a good solution for me regardless. So people will say things like, well, if you don't say something, then you side with this part. That is not true. And what I'm finding so puzzling and outrageous about this situation, maybe the one that you're thinking of right now, is how emotionally charged and absolutely absurd people are being to people that are saying literally nothing. Even just the suggestion that you might be saying something will cause people to say the most horrible things to you. People have said to me this weekend, will you side with terrorists? What are you, insane? I think that's hate speech. I think that's hate speech. If you would suggest to me that I side with and or endorse and or encourage and or think is okay for the most absolutely abhorrent things to happen, that's on you, bro. How could you say that to me or to anybody else? People are letting their emotions get the best of them. And just because you think you're 100% right doesn't mean you are or aren't. And multiple things can be true at the same time. And people will infer what they think that you're talking about and go absolutely insane in the comments or messaging or talking to other people without a specific issue even being referenced. You're not going to bully me, and you shouldn't bully anybody to have a take on something. Multiple things can be true at the same time, and proof and evidence can be provided for a multitude of different issues. And even though so many people will, in their head, draw the conclusion about what I or whoever other influencer, whoever other person is inferring or referring to, that's the whole point. You're drawing that conclusion yourself. And even though you may think that what I'm talking about is obvious, unless I'm explicitly saying it, you don't know that for sure. So it'd be one thing to want to talk to me about it and get my opinion about it. It's another position entirely to draw the conclusion about what I'm saying and then be mad at me and or smear me or any other person as a result of your belief of what that person means or intends. These things, hyper emotional, hypersensitive, perhaps in your mind, hyper obvious situations deserve a take. But no person should be bullied and or smeared for not having one because they don't know the full story of something. And not knowing the full story doesn't mean it's not happening, doesn't mean they don't believe in it, doesn't mean that they endorse one position or the other. It's just they don't have a take. That's it. So miss me with this fake outrage and get your emotions in order and stay principled. Communication during highly emotional, highly sensitive, highly terrible situations such as the one that you might be thinking about is so difficult for anyone, for everyone. But the way that we approach and or communicate about this tense situation and the next 500 tense situations is the same way that the rule of law is supposed to be carried out. Equal treatment for all. That goes for speech, that goes for First Amendment, that goes for a court of law. That's the American way. That's the way of freedom. Those with a take, make your voices heard. Those without a take, don't feel pressured or bullied to have one. And to all the people that are highly emotionally charged, that are drawing conclusions about other people, commenting or saying things, you're entitled to do that. But put the shoe on the other foot for the next 10 issues. I believe that you may look at things differently. And if you were to swap positions for any of the other multitude of different issues in the past 2 years that weren't the one that you feel really emotional or that it's so obvious about right now, your opinion may have been different on that issue 2 months ago, and likely will be for many other issues in the future. If you can separate your emotions from being principled, we'll all be better off for it. And if that causes you to not want to be connected to or consume content from another person, that's fine. But to let your emotions cause you to lash out at these people that you may otherwise consider to be great and honorable people deserving of great respect that now you suddenly sideline because of this, I don't know that you'll think that forever.